All right, what's up, boys? Today we're gonna be doing something I've always wanted to do to this car since the second I started drifting it, was change the steering setup. Before, as you know, FRSs have electronic power steering, and that's fine for like the stock engine and everything if you're using all the stock electronics. But when you have pretty much like a swap and you don't have any of the stock electronics, what I did last season, I still had the fuse box, the factory fuse box and everything, and I had wired the electronic power steering, which is just a motor on the column here, to like kind of run at half power, I believe. I don't know if it was the full power or not, but I was just kind of tricking it to think that it was on, and the power steering worked until you really started to get like full lock and everything. And then especially this car is a PBM angle kit, and with the rack offset spacers. With the power steering before, I should say, before I put the angle kit on and everything, it wasn't too bad. But once I put these on with the angle kit, the leverage is just like pretty much doubled. So it's a lot harder for the power steering to do its job, especially if it's not running at full power. So I kind of just wanted to bite the bullet anyways and just go to a S13 rack. So there's not really anything on YouTube for this. I tried to look personally and I haven't seen too much. So hopefully this helps you guys out by the time I post this. I think there's like one other guy who's doing it but never finished it. So hopefully my tutorial will help you guys out the most. So I figured I'd show you guys before I start cutting up stuff, but I don't really want to make aftermarket cross member. Just for this is a drift car, I should say, and just for like most of the rules for like Formula Drift and stuff, you can't really like modify your subframe too much. No, I'm not in Formula Drift or anything, but I mean I'm just gonna follow that in case like I ever were to like do like a pro-am event or something and they cared. I don't know, but I just figured I should follow it. So I'm going to make this, I guess, Formula Drift legal by not making my own custom subframe or anything, as that would probably be easier than doing this. I'm just going to basically what I want to do is, I don't like these at all, these stupid offset spacers. They put a ton of wear on the rack. You can't run boots on your rack, so a ton of debris gets in there. You can't really run things over here, and it's just kind of a big mess. These like loosen, you have to notch the rack. It's a big pain. So what I want to do is eliminate the need for that, and to do that you have to basically move the rack about 2 inches forward. So that's pretty much impossible with this setup because, I mean, look how the subframe is designed. But with this, we're going to have to cut it anyways. So I'm just going to do a lot of cutting and move this whole rack basically 2 inches forward. And off the bat, just looking at things that I'm going to run into, if you notice, the S13 rack is way smaller than the FRS rack. These are ISR, extended inner tie rods. I was told that these would work, as the PBM kit uses I think S14 extended tie rods and outer tie rods, so this should technically thread around onto here, but it doesn't look like this is gonna work. So WiseFab, they actually make like a kit to do this. Actually, they make like a section you can weld in that works on their angle kit. I talked to a couple people, and I even talked to the dude who owns PBM about it, and he was telling me that the geometry on the two kits are different and it wouldn't work that well. I don't know how much that's true, or if he just kind of gave me the runaround, but I thought it was just, and that bracket is like $300 just to purchase individually. So I figured I'm just gonna make my own anyways. But that's for the mounting of the rack. But as I was talking about, for the tie rods, I believe since WiseFab like makes a kit to do this, the WiseFab tie rods, if you look at them, they're like double as long. So I think I'm gonna pick up some WiseFab S13 like FRS kit tie rods, which are gonna be way longer than these, and that should get me more to like this length here, which is what I'm gonna need. So that's what I'm planning on doing. That I haven't ordered that yet. As far as the steering setup, as you can see, the splines are different on these two racks. So the factory column would work, I guess, if you made your own like U-joint. That's an adapter, like that it goes from this 36 spline to whatever the factory FRS one is. I don't really know. But since I'm doing all the work of, if you haven't seen my other videos, I'm basically caging this whole thing and getting it ready for the season. It's an LS swap. And what I'm going to do is I ordered a Woodward steering column. They're very common in a lot of like race cars. A lot of like pretty much all the FD cars and everything, they run them. It's basically a steering column that you can kind of like get made to order. So it's going to mount to this bar here, the dash bar. And I got rid of all the factory steering setup here. So basically it'll mount to this, and then it's gonna go through here. And then I bought all the stuff to basically make my own universal joints. You can get like custom pieces, so you can just weld however long you need it to be. So that's in the mail. That should be here soon. And when I get that, I'll show you guys how I do it, and I'll even show you exactly what I bought, so you guys can do it the same thing. This is pricey, I should say this from the start. Even the steering stuff alone was almost $600 just for the column and U-joints, let alone I think I paid $200 for this rack. I'm gonna have, I don't even know how much the WiseFab tie rods are, but I'm sure those are $100, $200. And then I've got some nice upgraded steering lines here. I think these are Chase Base, possibly, or ISR. So I mean, it does get expensive. Another factor I should say in this of how I'm going to power this rack. So as you know, the factory FRS rack is electronic. This is basically just manual down here. All the electronics for the motor is in the column. As you see, we're switching to a hydraulic rack. So I guess if you had an FRS engine in there still, like the Ep.1, you would have to figure out something more along my setup. A lot of people with like 2Gs or with LS, you can just run a power steering pump, like they run like a hydraulic pump. I'm not going that route. I've heard interesting things about them. There are some people like them, some people don't. As far as like in drifting, you can burn them up a lot. I thought it was a cool idea to get, if I can find it over here. This is a Toyota MR2 electronic hydraulic power steering pump. Basically what it is, it's a big pump that's electronic that pumps fluid. So I'll just run this off like a switch that's on, and this is going to pump the fluid to the rack. And that's gonna be, it's gonna give me a lot of options here. I can basically mount that wherever I want. If I even want to mount it in the trunk or up here, I don't know exactly where I'm gonna mount it yet, but I'm gonna have to get all like custom lines for that. So that's gonna be a little bit expensive, but overall, I hope it should hopefully last longer than possibly like a belt-driven pump or anything. It even simplifies up my my belts up here and everything. Just keep the engine bay as simple as possible. We're just gonna make the steering its own little standalone system. So stay tuned for that. I gotta basically remove this rack next, and I plan on basically just cutting away part of this section. So I should say the rules for like the Formula Drift rule where like you can't modify the subframe. The subframe has to have at least one spot. So I think it's like this front section that still remains intact. So I can cut pretty much this whole inside part out as long as I keep this that's still remaining, like factory mounting locations and structure. So I got to be careful here with the engine mounts. That's where the engine mounts. And I think though, if I cut all through here, basically out, I'm gonna have to make a ton of bracing in it, but it should just let me slide the rack a lot forward more. And then we'll figure out how we're going to basically mount this rack after that. That should be the hardest part, but I've got a couple plans for that, so you guys will see that in a minute. All right, so I just did some measuring. This is basically what I'm gonna be removing. Just basically this yellow line here, all in here, and all through here. The PBM kit, it comes with these braces you're supposed to weld in here. So I had welded those in. I'm going to remove those basically here, so the rack can come right through here, the tie rod. So that's gonna basically give me my 2 inches of clearance I need. And the next part would just be getting room for where the steering column out. So I just gotta clearance this, cut through here, and then we're gonna have to come up with some supports and bracing to strengthen this thing back up. But we're just gonna cut it apart now and get in there. All right, so factory rack's out. I basically cut everything I showed you and a little bit more, and you're left with this at that point. It was a lot of cutting, like 3 cutting discs on an angle grinder, and I'm trying to leave these intact for the engine, just so it has something stiffer to mount on. We're gonna have to strengthen this subframe up a ton, because as you can see, it's pretty flimsy now. But I think this is pretty close to what I need. Obviously, I gotta clean this up a little bit. But sorry, it's a little hard to do one-handed. But if you kind of throw that in there, flip it up, obviously. But yeah, that's looking really close. As you can see, this is almost exactly where the factory, where the tie rods would have been with the offset spacers on the factory rack. So there is a little clearance here. This is where the 2 hydraulic lines go. That's going to be tricky. I'll have to run 90s. And as you know, the headers in the LS, they come like right here too, like almost touch this. So we'll have to see about this. I might actually clearance this and then run them underneath the headers or something. I'll have to figure that out later. But I'm not going to do much more yet of cutting wise, because I've already cut a ton out. I don't want to cut any more than I have to until I get my steering column. It should be here in a few days. Once I get my steering column, I'll just cut to the next video when I get it. But I'm gonna install it over here just so I can like have it dangle down there and just kind of figure out the exact angle this needs to be at, because I have no clue right now. So once we get that figured out, I will update you. But yeah, I wonder if I can get one little view of what it looks like down there. Basically, that's where the rack has to go. The steering column has to come between my header, basically here, and mount somewhere in here. As you can see, this is the engine mount, so it shouldn't be too crazy. I'm gonna have to make my own U-joints, which might be a little difficult, but I'll show you guys how I do it. There's not too much room down here, but I think there'll be enough to make some stuff happen. And I'll show you guys what I'm left with. Alright guys, so my steering column just showed up finally. Like I said, it's from Woodward. It's all custom spec'd. I will include in the description every part number and everything I ordered, just so you guys can just use that if you're gonna go the same route as me. But here we go, steering column. It's telescopic, so it expands to help fit better. And then I also got quick release. So this one just goes right on the wheel, and then it pops right on here. Super stoked on that, pretty awesome. And then we have our U-joint. I believe this one is from the Nissan rack. And then this is just open here because they're gonna be weld on. We're gonna make our own U-joint basically. So I got some tube. This is 2 feet of tube. And then like I said, this goes on here. We'll weld this and cut this to the appropriate length. Once we get the steering column, and rack in there. And I have a firewall bushing. So this has to go through the firewall, and it passes through this right here. So that's something to mount it, because we're not going to be using any of the stock stuff. I should have one more U-joint. So this one goes from the column here to our tube here, so that's how we're gonna do it. But yeah, so this stuff is pretty sweet. It's all like SFI rated and everything. Super nice stuff. I definitely recommend the quality so far. I'll figure out how we're gonna get it in the car next, and I'll show you guys how we're gonna do it. Alright, I've got a light down there now, and I'll show you what we got going on. Like I said before, it's just zip tied right now, so nothing too crazy mounting wise. But I basically moved it as far forward as possible, and with being on the back side of this box piece. And LS swap, guys, is really nice because all the issues with fitting the LS into the FRS is the rear oil pan clearance on the subframe and steering rack. And now that that's all gone, it provides a ton of room, so that's pretty nice. Let me get down here and I'll show you how we're gonna do steering. So sorry, this is like really close to me right now, but as you can see, we have the universal coming right off the rack. It's really close to my header, but it's gonna work. And then that is where it comes through up there out of the firewall. And then we're just gonna put a straight piece in between the two and weld it, and that'll be the universal joint to connect the steering rack to the steering shaft. If I can get a good video down here, that's how it looks. A lot's been cut out. It's gonna be way easier for me to show you this outside of the car, but I did make some room for some lines to come through. They're gonna have to be like 90s. So as you can see there, the structural rigidity of this thing is not much is left. So I am going to, now that I have it sitting in a decent spot where it's gonna work, I'm gonna clamp it down, get it out of the car, fix this issue right here where it's a little too close, because it's not gonna be able to move back and forth. And then once I get that, I'm gonna start working on just a couple mounts just to get the rack like somewhat in there, and we'll see what I can work up. All right, what's up, guys? Kind of scratched on the plan of the other, of using the stock mounts to mount the rack, and I ended up getting some tube clamps. I'll link these in the description. I think they're about like 40, 50 bucks, and they're really nice. They're machined piece of metal, and they have 3 screws, and they basically clamp together like this. Okay, so I measured this. This was 45 millimeters, I believe, in diameter, and these are the closest thing I could find. They're like I want to say like a millimeter short or something of that. So they're really close, and I even been test fitting them and everything. And if you just smack them with a mallet, they fill the gap up real nice. And I like using this better than like a bushing and this, because I mean this is gonna be really solid. I don't really feel like I need a bushing on my steering rack, so this isn't gonna move at all, which is what I want. It's gonna be really strong. You can get really good heat on it and penetrate it into here. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna put 2 of these in here to hold the rack, and then we'll basically plate everything, strengthen it back up. But this is what's gonna mount our rack. So I think I'm gonna put one right here most likely, and probably one right here, and that should be good enough to mount it, just 2. And this is what I've seen like a lot of like other companies that sell like machined like versions of these for a lot of money. They kind of do this with these clamps. So hopefully this works out, and you guys can just grab these for a lot cheaper than spending $100, $150 on some clamps. So I think these are about like almost 40 or 50 bucks. I'll link them in the description, like I said before. But yeah, we're gonna measure this out, find a good spot where to put this, put it in there, support it, tack it in place, test the rack, and then from there we'll end up welding it all the way in and test fitting. All right, so I ended up finishing up my firewall plate for the steering. Basically it's just a piece of metal that I patched. The hole was too big for this existing Woodward like firewall bushing to fit in, so I ended up cutting the hole even bigger. Then I made that square plate there with a 2-inch hole that I hole soled in for this firewall bushing, and I just stitch welded it on right there. I still got a little more welding to do, but that should be more than enough. I might end up seam sealing it as well. So basically that goes through there, comes up to here, and goes to the steering shaft right here. So then what I ended up doing was going underneath the car, setting everything up, putting the U-joint on there, and I just tacked it in place right now. But it is hooked up to the rack. As you can see, when I turn the wheel here, it is turning the rack back and forth. See? So it is all working. It is really smooth. The U-joint angle is really nice. That one's pretty much at a 15 degree, and this one's probably at like a 30 degree. which is easily for this. There's no binding of the steering. There's nothing it can hit. The one bad thing, I guess, for me, my car has a swap in it. It would be different for everybody with their own engine setup, but the best way I can describe this is the way I had my exhaust was it was gonna hit. So I ended up, I'd rather have the steering set up and not have it hit my exhaust. And so I just ended up taking off my exhaust right there. There's a V-band right over here. And there's plenty of room to get a 3-inch pipe around this. So I'm just gonna do a couple pie cuts and go around the steering shaft, because I'd rather have this have first priority than trying to, get a crappy angle just to fit my exhaust. So I'm gonna redo that as well. I plan on doing oval anyways for ground clearance with the wide body now. So yeah, it's on there. Everything's working. Super happy with it. Looks really good. All the angles and everything. The next step would be, since everything lines up, as you can see, that goes right to there. The next step would be to strengthen up that core support. So I have those clamps in there, and we're gonna have to add a lot more metal, just like tiny little pieces of metal to brace it. So I plan on just adding a couple pieces to brace the subframe, and we'll get right on that. Strengthen that back up. We can fully weld in that U-joint that we made. Put everything else in. And then there's one other thing I might change. I think I might end up changing this. I spent all the time to make this stupid thing, but I was doing some research, and I'm gonna have like probably a race pack in here. I used the stock cluster last year, but I want to use a race pack. And my design is kind of just it's pretty big. If I have I don't know if you can go in here, you can look. If I sit in here, there really isn't that much room for a race pack to go here. And if it would, it'd be up here, which I don't know how I feel about that. So I might end up doing some tube out of triangle or something. We'll see. I might end up using this and just modifying it. We'll see. But that's just something, if you see me change that here in the next couple of minutes, that's probably why, just because visibility for dash. But yeah, looking great. Super stoked. The steering wheel is at a slight angle. In the seat, it feels completely fine. The way the FRS is designed from the stock steering, it goes straight, hits a U-joint, which corrects it. Then it goes down and hits another U-joint. Since we're only using one U-joint here, two U-joints, I guess, at the rack, the steering shaft has to be at an angle. There's just no way around it unless you want to put another U-joint in it. Some people might bother. To me, it's barely at an angle. It feels fine inside the car, so I'm just gonna leave it. It just feels good driving. So if it ends up not liking it, I might just scoot this over a little bit, so the wheels just might be a little bit more to the right instead of at an angle.